Welcome to the BIPOCanadian Podcast. I'm your host, Aiden Akhtar. If you follow us on Instagram, you've probably read our post on Tristen Durocher and Walking with Our Angels. For those of you who don't know, this summer, Tristen Durocher and Chris Merasty embarked on a 600-kilometer walk from Ronge to Regina to protest the Saskatchewan Party's unanimous vote against Bill 618, the Saskatchewan Strategy for Suicide Prevention Act. Following the walk, Tristen went on a 44-day ceremonial fast, and the two set up camp in Wascana Park to raise awareness for the high suicide rates in Saskatchewan and how Indigenous communities are especially affected. Today we have both Tristen and Chris joining us. Welcome, guys, and thanks so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for inviting us.
Yes, thank you.
So Tristen, you took notice of the high frequency of youth suicides in northern Saskatchewan after playing fiddle at many of the funerals. To start us off, can you tell us a little bit more about how this issue being so close to home inspired your Suicide Crisis Awareness Walk?
When I was 8 years old, one of my cousin's best friends took her life. She was only 15. And she had always been at my grandmother's house for Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas dinners, and they were pretty much inseparable. They were like sisters. And as an 8-year-old, I couldn't comprehend how somebody so beautiful with her entire life ahead of her, a really good athlete, a good student, and just a kind, gentle person could really do that and take their lives. So the reality of suicide always disturbed me and was always something that I would think about from time to time, and that was my first experience. And then as I grew, we lost more people. I had lost an uncle who was an elder in his 70s, and so it was very, very sad to know that he had lived so long. He had done so well. And towards the end of his life, in his 70s, he had decided to take his life. So I had two experiences, one with a very young person and then one with a very old elder. And both experiences kind of solidified to me that it can happen to anybody and that anybody could really choose that route. And what I saw as a musician then traveling the north and eventually going to funerals is that it does affect a lot of different demographics and people. Currently, for ages 10 to 46, suicide is the leading cause of death in northern Saskatchewan, which is a pretty horrific statistic that it beats all other causes of death in this region for that large of a demographic. There's nothing that takes as many as suicide. And over the course of this walk with Chris, when we left Ronge on July 2nd to when we got to Regina, there had been around 10 suicides across northern Saskatchewan. Just in the duration of our walk, which is supposed to be a suicide prevention walk, there were about 10. And since I ended my journey there and our camp is now taken down, I was having coffee and tea with a woman who works for a tribal council in the city, and she said that the number since we left Ronge to when everything wrapped up is about 17 to 18 people have taken their lives across Saskatchewan, meaning up in Fond du Lac and the Fly-ins to even just down south. I mean, these are the ones that we know of. Of course, there are going to be ones that are a little bit more quiet, like in the southern cities and places where it's happened, but at least 18 people have taken their lives during the course of a demonstration, which was supposed to be a call to action for more help and services. So it's a pretty serious issue.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Chris, feel free to touch on your organization or share what led you personally to crossing paths with Tristen.
My path with Tristen there, when he approached me about the suicide walk, my first thought was at the time that I used to live in La Loche, when we were going through a suicide crisis. I think it was back in 2012, 2013. We were losing, I would say 3, maybe 4 babies a week to suicide. And it was almost to the point that parents and grandparents were literally handcuffing themselves to their babies so that they wouldn't hurt themselves. And back then I was going to walk, but then something came over and something happened, and then the walk got, I guess, postponed until Tristen approached me with this idea. And just before then, I was experienced that with my own immediate family. With my daughter was trying to attempt suicide. And being that she's only 13 years old, it's a definitely call for help for sure, especially not only within our northern communities, but everywhere across Saskatchewan for sure. So with me going on this walk, it was a lot of healing with myself, seeing what I had to go through with my own daughter. And even my stepdaughter as well had some suicidal thoughts just recently. So we addressed that situation, and we gave her as much support and acknowledgement as we possibly can. But we definitely need more help up in our northern communities.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think that a lot of people have now recently sort of had their attention drawn to this crisis because of what you guys have been doing. And that doesn't necessarily mean, though, that everybody responded well to hearing it. And so did you guys learn anything new about the people of Saskatchewan in this process? Were reactions about what you expected, or were they better, or were they worse?
Everything in between. We did get a lot of support. And there was a man, he's a MLA for the NDP. His name is Doyle Vermette. He's the one who proposed the bill that was voted down. He said, you would be surprised at how much support you're going to get throughout this journey walking down, even from their own supporters. There's a lot of people of all political stripes that were very upset because as of now, Saskatchewan has the highest suicide rates per capita in Canada. In the past 15 years, we've lost over 2,300 people. And so not all of those lives were Indigenous, and not all of the families of these people who've lost loved ones are voting for said political party over another. So this is affecting everybody across all walks of life, all professional avenues. And so I think as a province collectively, we are ready for more to be done regarding this issue. And so we did receive a lot of beautiful support. And some of that support came in the form of something as simple as people dropping us off supper as we made our way down to Regina. And some of that support came in the form of donations. And so we've received the support, yes, but then there also was the other negative side of the spectrum. There were some people who sent me emails. Is this only about Indigenous suicide? If it's only about Indigenous suicide, I support it. I don't support it, but if it's about all suicide, I support it. And they were kind of saying like, well, if this is just an Indigenous issue, you cannot count on my support type of wording in a lot of their emails and inboxes that I received. So I got to see a full spectrum of people being very beautifully supportive, but then also very vulgar and ignorant and borderline racist. And did it shock me? Absolutely not. I have Facebook. I read the comments on CBC articles. There are some CBC outposts that actually banned all comments for things relating to Indigenous issues because of all the vulgarity and all of the racist ignorance that people try to aim towards Indigenous people. So I didn't have my head in the sand. I was not an ostrich buried in some fantasy that Canada's beautiful and kind. And I know we have some people that are, but like all communities, you have people of all spectrums. And over the course of the walk, I did learn that there is still a lot of really deep-seated, unhealthy views of Indigenous people. Justice Minister Marie St. Clair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, He said that all of the education people received in the residential schools in Canada that taught them that Indigenous people and culture should be demoralized, dehumanized, and demeaned was also taught to the rest of Canada. So it's not just us Indigenous people who went to residential schools and had to deal with all of that unhealthy thinking regarding us as a demonized demographic. It's our whole country. So I know that work is continuous and ongoing. And when I walked down to Regina, I got to see it very overtly displayed. Like there were multiple times. I lost count of how many times people brought me supper, thinking that it would be funny to bring somebody doing a hunger strike who hadn't eaten in sometimes 25, sometimes 30 plus days supper. And it was these young, non-Indigenous dudes who like to drag race up and down the street by the Legislative Assembly who would bring me supper and think it was oh so funny. To me, that's pretty abusive and kind of psychologically disturbing and manipulative. And one of those men actually ran for mayor of Regina a few times. He brought me supper on multiple occasions and said with a smile and a grin on his face, "Here, I just thought you might be hungry." And at that point was maybe 30 days into my hunger strike. I looked at him and said, "Well, no shit." And my friends threw it away for me. So I had people come and eat ice cream in front of me, come and sit down with their McDonald's, and also just go out of their way to bring me supper. And I've had people kick some of my solar lights around the teepee, which were illuminating photos of people who've taken their lives because of suicide, some of them as young as 8 years old. I had men kick some of my solar lights and say, "This is my fucking park. Why can't I set up a tent here? How come I can't have my RV here? How come I can't come and camp here and squat like you squatters without being arrested?" And I just kind of patiently, calmly looked at him and said, "That's a risk we're all willing to take. They're making no special provisions for us." So yes, I did see the racists, but I did see the beautiful people who put their political differences aside, who put their religious differences aside, and came there to pray and give solidarity and give support. Did you know we had a prayer group of rabbis and bishops and priests from Lutheran denominations, Catholic denominations, Protestant denominations? There was an interfaith letter of solidarity and support signed by, I want to say, 20 plus religious leaders across Saskatchewan. Now, that's a very beautiful, let's put our ideological differences aside and support this together. And that is what I expected from our politicians. I got it from our religious leaders. I got it from certain members of the public, but I didn't get it from the people in power who, at that point in time, with the current capacity they had to push legislation through, really mattered, which disheartened me. But to answer your question, yes, I did see everything, and no, it didn't surprise me, but it did reinvigorate my determination to try to deconstruct a lot of that thinking and undo a lot of that racist view that people view Indigenous people with, because I knew it was there, but I never had to see it so barefaced before.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, did you have anything to add
Yes.
to that?
When we first started walking, the negativity, getting the Facebook messages, getting the emails and stuff like that, there was a lot of doubt in us that we were just going to give up halfway through and everything like that. But the determination to keep on going, the willpower, just to knowing what we were walking for, kept us going. It was very emotional. A lot of mornings waking up just in tears, basically. And it was just, to me, it was a very disheartening thing to see, especially, looking at the some of the comments, like Tristen said, on CBC articles, news articles, and seeing all the racism and all the hatred out there. It's just, it's a very sad feeling to feel. And not only that is to, come up and fight for something that plagues us, so many of us, not only in our northern communities, but yet all of Saskatchewan. And I mean, like, we should all be standing in solidarity to sign this bill. And to me, I don't care which party you're working with. It could be the Sask party or it could be the NDP. When they're putting such a meaningful legislation to the table to help so many people in our province, it should be an automatic yes. I don't care whose party it is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always kind of mind-boggling to see the lengths that someone will go just to undo something that someone is doing because they're supposed to be on opposite sides of, be it politics or religion. And it's just baffling because it's just like you said, everyone should be together working for this positive change. It seems like a no-brainer to help prevent suicide, and for people to come out and say, no, I don't like that. It's just hatred, and it's just awful. So on September 11th, the Queen's Bench Judge Graham Mitchell dismissed the Saskatchewan Government and Provincial Capital Commission's application to remove your teepee from Wascana Park. Did you expect that decision from the court? And were you surprised to see Graham Mitchell himself pay you a visit?
Well, that decision did surprise me. I believed it was a 50-50. Just some context as for this park and the bylaws there was a previous camp called Justice for Our Stolen Children. They set up a teepee camp. It was an indefinite presence. They camped for, I want to say 180 days. Like, it was a very long time. And they were taken to court, and they lost their constitutional argument that their freedom of expression and their peaceful assembly had a right under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to be there. And so they actually sent that in for an appeal. It's still in the court process right now. The appeal process at the Supreme Court level takes a very long time, and so it actually hasn't really gone to the floor there yet, but it had grounds for an appeal. They don't just take anything for an appeal unless there's actually a valid, justifiable argument. So already prior to our teepee being set up on that lawn, there was a constitutional argument that had a Supreme Court appeal validity in progress. So I knew it was there, but that it just needed to be a little bit stronger. And so when we set up our teepee, no, I didn't sign the permit or make an application, because the permit bans explicitly open fires, overnight camping, permanent structures, which I suppose for some reason or another, they classify a teepee as a permanent structure, even though we could take it down in 10 minutes and it's portable, which is the whole damn point of the thing, because the buffalo moved, and so we have to move with them. Anyway, I didn't sign for the permit because I knew it wouldn't be granted. We had the CEO of the Provincial Capital Commission there to tell me they wouldn't allow me to set up my teepee, and so we knew that wasn't in the question. I set it up anyway. I figured, okay, well, we'll just have to, when the time comes, make that same argument that the last camp made. Charter of Rights and Freedoms, freedom of expression, freedom of peaceful assembly, freedom to express your opinion in creative ways and do so in public, but also freedom of religion, because it was a 44-day fast in progress with a sacred fire, with pipe ceremonies, with round dances, with a lot of Indigenous spirituality, ceremonial practices, and cultural practices. So we had that argument, but it encompassed freedom of religion, and a lot of the ceremonial components of our camp further solidified and made stronger that charter argument. And so it won. And I didn't have an overly optimistic hope for the outcome of that case, because there's a lot of times when legally for Indigenous people, we have the right to do something and the court is like, nah. So to me, it was a 50-50 coin toss. I didn't get my hopes up. And when the verdict was delivered, I was very relieved, because what that did is it allowed for me to continue the fast and finish it without interruption. We had an altar set up in there, and the elders who set it up, like it can't be moved until everything's done, until the fast is done. And to disrupt all of that would have been against our ceremonial protocols. And so I'm really glad that the judge respected Indigenous spirituality. And his judgment, there were a lot of people that were very moved by it, because he delivered a 15-page reasoning for the judgment he made. And he had referenced the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls final report. And he said that this teepee camp and our demonstration on that lawn represents a push for us all to take more steps towards reconciliation in Canada. So he got to actually contribute to that process, to that moving forward, and to that restoration of relationships between Indigenous people and our justice system and our public, etc. So I thought that was very beautiful of him. And I thought that was very brave of him to do in Saskatchewan, where we can be behind in a lot of respects regarding these things. I mean, this is the province with the Starlight Tour as part of its history. This is the province where, they cleared the plains of all the buffalo to starve the Cree and force them onto reserves. And that's how come Cree people refer to Regina as pile of bones. And this is the province that did the Gerald Stanley jury selection so that that man could get away with murder and walk away without even a charge for, it's ridiculous. So because it was this Saskatchewan court, and I'm an Indigenous person, et cetera, I thought, okay, we may not get the justice that we deserve, rightfully so, but I'll go in with an open mind and we'll see what happens. So not only did he deliver that judgment, but he actually had the courage to come and visit the site. And in the judge's defense, he didn't know what he was walking into. He didn't know there would be media there. He didn't know that there was a closing ceremony because it wasn't publicly posted on our page. All he wanted to do was to see this teepee and this portrait gallery, this demonstration of freedom of expression that the court was protecting and upholding, a charter right in progress, in process. And so he decided to come, but unknown to him, he came on our final afternoon, the day we were taking the teepee down and finishing up, where we had multiple media presence and a lot of people with cameras. And so it became a little bit of a spectacle. And I felt a little bad for him because I thought, geez, he just wanted to really low key as part of the scene, just walk by and check it out. And it was actually a lawyer there who does a lot of human rights things. Larry Kowalchuk, who thought, oh my God, the judge is here. He better come and meet Tristen, and he better come and see the teepee. And so he actually went and found the judge and said, come over here. And the judge was like, oh, I'm just here to see it. And he's like, oh, you got to meet Tristen. Come on. And so the judge came, he met with us, and Chris had gifted him a sash. And a few days later, it was the headline on the National Post. And the conservative right-wing press is trying to scream bias, bias, bias. And I believe they did that so that it would kind of get the public ready for a potential appeal on the part of the Saskatchewan government trying to appeal his judgment. And so I felt a little bad for the judge, but I mean, hey, he's a tough guy. He's probably had worse happen, and I'm sure he's used to the right-wing province that we're living in. Just as a side note, I want to tell you a funny little story of just the type of arrogance of the Saskatchewan government's legal defense. The judge said, "You're criticizing Tristen Durocher for not filling out the permit, but is there really any indication that that permit would have been successful in that it would have made some provisions to allow for his temporary stay on Wascana Park lawn if he was to go and apply for it?" And the lawyer for the Provincial Capital Commission looked at him and said, "Your Honor, we will never know." And to me, it's like, well, I met your CEO, Monique Miller. I asked her, can't you make temporary provisions to a permit that allow for our stay here? And she said, the bylaws are very clear. And she shook her head no. Moreover, Laurie Carr, the Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs, came to visit the teepee. She walked in, and before she left, she said, "I just want to inform you that I'm head of the Provincial Capital Commission, and we are filing for a court injunction for your forced removal to enforce these bylaws because they apply to everybody." And so that's from the CEO's boss, like the head of the entire PCC, which is a conflict of interest because she's the Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs. I'm a young Indigenous guy coming to raise awareness and blow the whistle on the leading cause of death for a large demographic in a territory and for a people she's supposed to be lobbying and rooting for the betterment of. But that's another story for another time. Anyway, Justice Gray Mitchell came to visit us. I thought that was really nice. And not a lot of people know this, but there was an October 14th court date because the Saskatchewan government was going to try and get the judge to nullify his decision. And after he was not to do that, as we assumed he wouldn't because that would incriminate himself, they were going to go for an appeal. However, they canceled that court hearing. They've decided they won't go through with it. And the provincial government has decided they won't go for an appeal. So that means that the judgment Eleanor Sunchild was successful in getting stands, and they will have to change those bylaws. And I believe it is 60 days? I'm not sure. Might be 160 days. Arbitrary number. But either way, Justice Mitchell's decision stands. It's not going to be appealed. There will have to be provisions to the bylaws in Wascana Park to allow for people to do things that are protected by the charter. And they're just going to have to deal with that. So that CEO of the Provincial Capital Commission who shook her head no at me and said, the bylaws are very clear. Well, now she's got to get to the drawing board and change those bylaws because that judgment is very clear.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Chris, did you have any notes on that?
For me, like when Justice Graham Mitchell there showed up to the legislative grounds and seeing us, I happened to, I was getting ready to call up the youth to come in and start serving the elders the food and the snacks and stuff that was all there during the closing ceremony. And when I looked over to my left, I seen, well, Tristen was there. I gifted Tristen a Menina North medallion that I had gotten made. And then I looked over to my left and there was a judge standing there. And I wasn't even thinking about handing him the Métis sash. I just seen it around my waist. And I thought right away, like, young Tristen is a Métis man. And he's been fasting on this legislative grounds for 44 days. You voted in favor of this. And what a better gift would be than to receive a Métis sash. So that's why I gifted him the Métis sash.
That's great. It's good to see some form of veritable change, because of you guys. There's going to be amendments to, what is going to be allowed in those parks. And so that's something to be super proud of, that you guys, and even just to have gotten recognition from a judge that what you guys were doing was right, I think is something to really be proud of. So now your walk has long since ended and your demonstration at Wascana is over. Well over 7,000 people have joined you since your walk began on July 2nd, whether it be through Facebook or in person. Do you guys have plans on how to continue the fight to raise awareness and demand proper recognition for our province's suicide crisis?
You can go first on this one, Chris.
Okay. Young Tristen has gifted us the teepee that he stayed in for 44 days into our organization. I have an organization that I founded back in January called Men of the North. And what we do is we deal with men and mental health. It's more of a healing group. And we work with elders, we work with middle-aged men, and we work with youth as well. So we're planning on standing teepee up once a month. I'm hoping to get it for the day of the family allowance day of each month, to stand it up for 24 hours to advocate for suicide, anti-racism, bullying, missing Indigenous murdered women, overdoses, sobriety, the list just goes on and on and on. So we can stand it up, hoping once a month to advocate for, just to create the awareness, have the awareness ceremonies going on once a month. We're also looking at doing a lot of other things as we're becoming partnered with the University of Regina as into doing some research with men and mental health. So we're looking forward to that. We're just finishing up our business plan right now with the Men in the North. So once all that gets in place, then we're going to be taking action and doing community initiatives for the youth, for men, for families in our community. So we're hoping that this will catch and we can start expanding and start going into other communities as well and helping them with what we got going on in Ronge here. But yeah, as of that, that's all we got so far, as we don't want to plan too far in advance, as you know, things do happen and it's just time and patience, and hopefully everything will start falling into place. But yeah, definitely we're gonna try our best to continue that awareness. We're also looking at doing a 44 sobriety challenge, just to honor Tristen and his 44-day fast. So we're maybe looking at maybe sometime in the new year doing that, and as well as a 55 driveway challenge for the youth. Do shoveled 55 sidewalks and driveways for the youth, and have a prize or a gift or something at the end of that. So we'll definitely continue the fight for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah. So as for projects, for me, I'm going back to northern Manitoba because I work for the Frontier School Division as a fiddle teacher. They offer a fiddle program in their schools, and I teach in about 5 schools, and I have around 380 fiddle students. So that keeps me very busy because all of the schools where I teach are like the northernmost edge of the school division in Manitoba. Like beyond the communities that I teach in are fly-in communities. So there's no cell service. I need to take a satellite phone for safety. And that keeps me busy because I believe like music and art is very healing. And it gives them something that could build their confidence that they have to work towards. And also each year they have these gatherings where the different schools get together and all the children play music together. So it's a very like community based. It gives them a nice community. The kids that aren't into the sports and that aren't necessarily always hockey driven, you know, because in the northern regions of Saskatchewan and Manitoba, we have a lot of sport activity and recreation. But for the kids that are a little bit more artistic like myself, there's not a lot for them to do. So this is my form of suicide prevention, is getting back to that music. And that was always my intention and always my plan, because basically I am only 24 years old. I'm a musician. And this summer, I just had this idea in June. You know, we left 10 days after the idea came. So really, this was only supposed to be a very brief, temporary call to action for the government to do more, and for communities to mobilize and try to tackle and deal with this issue. But for me personally, I don't necessarily have all of the answers, and I don't necessarily have a lot of ongoing projects to deal with this particular crisis outside of what I know best, which is music, and trying to give that to young people and new generations, because it's helped me in my life, and it's given me a lot of friends and a lot of opportunity to travel and do something hopeful and kind of fulfilling, which is learning and growing and challenging yourself musically. So I'll be going back to that in the months to come until there's a shutdown. We'll see what happens.
That's awesome to hear. And so we're running a little bit tight on time here, so I'll just go for one last question and then we'll wrap it up. Has this experience left you guys hopeful about the response that you received, and satisfied with the awareness that you've raised, with regards to hoping that this is going to push for more change in the future regarding bills like this in the future, or just managing the suicide crisis in Saskatchewan?
Well, I know that FSAN came to the TP site to announce that they were working on a suicide prevention bill that was going to be culturally grounded and grounded in community, more community-based solutions. And they didn't give an exact timeline for that, but I believe it's in 2021 or whatever. And so that was hopeful, because they had a lot of chiefs assembled. They had Chief Bobby Cameron of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations and Chief Perry Bellegarde of the Assembly of First Nations, which is like the national level. So he was also there. So there are some people in the high political scene of Indigenous governance who are ready to tackle suicide, the issue of it, and some form of legislation and some form of partnership and collaboration on the part of government. And so they're working on that. And then also there's been a recent announcement that FSAN has signed on to some letter of commitment with the government to do more for suicide prevention. However, I wasn't very optimistic about that one, because they say it's part of a broader 5-year plan, which to me is okay. Well, what are the nitty gritties of this 5-year plan? What's in it? That seems very vague. And why 5 years when the crisis is now? When literally over the course of my temporary walk, we've lost 15 plus people to suicide in our province, and the northern region of our province. So I wanted them to act immediately. Hence the hunger strike. The clock is ticking. Every day counts. If they want to end it and not look like a bunch of heartless, indifferent politicians to the public prior to an election, they better act quick. I really, really, really did think that there would be some form of legislated action to deal with this suicide pandemic, because our election isn't in November, and because I was literally starving on the front lawn of the Legislative Assembly, and they had the capacity to end it any day. But that didn't happen. But I am leaving optimistic, because we've sparked a public dialogue. We've made this part of the pre-election talking points for a lot of people. And even in the supporter base of the Saskatchewan Party, there are now hesitant supporters thinking, okay, is this really the right choice? I mean, they took a suicide prevention advocate to court and tried to hold him in civil contempt when there was even a constitutional argument for his presence on the lawn. So like that whole thing is just all problematic. I don't want to give anybody any false optimism, because this is a very serious issue and it requires very serious and immediate addressing. However, I don't want to be overly pessimistic because there are now wheels set in motion. That bill with the FSIN, that letter of commitment, whatever it may entail, and also the fact that now the supporters of these politicians are going to be asking them and calling their MLAs and talking to their families and their communities and putting it out there. What are our elected representatives' opinions and thoughts on this issue? And do they even consider it an issue? Because the truth is, a lot of Southern people don't, because it doesn't really touch on them. Our Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs, Lori Carr, is from Estevan. What problem is some Northern Reserve suicide epidemic and state of emergency to a person grocery shopping and going about their life in Estevan? And so these are all really, really important questions to be asking, and we'll see what happens. And if something doesn't happen, well, I'm sure there will be some form of mobilization. It won't be from me per se, but there are people in the wings that are really, really inspired by this issue, and it's been brought to the forefront and made part of the public dialogue, which is important in and of itself. So we don't know where the ripples will go, and I hope they go somewhere meaningful, helpful, and ultimately hopeful.
Chris?
Yeah, definitely. I hope so too. With the 75 days, right from the walk, right till the end of the fast, we did create a lot of ripples out there, and a lot of people are talking and looking at the news and seeing that the FSIN has signed some sort of agreement. And until I see some actions being taken, then I'll start believing. But until I see some action, I'm not going to be holding my breath for sure. As of right now, we'll just continue moving forward. I know right now with our organization here in the Ronge is we're having our meetings once a week, doing lots of healing within the 2 hours that we have our meetings hosted for. And we'll continue doing other community-based activities. So, I mean, we're creating tangible action here in La Ronge, and I'm hoping that something like this can happen in each and every community out there, not only for the men, but for the families, for the youth, for the women, for the children, for elders, and everybody. As we need to start addressing these issues, we need to start bringing in the community and being a community once again. I know in La Ronge there's a lot of dividers. There's Lac La Ronge, Indian Band, there's Air Ronge, and then there's a town of La Ronge. And right now, it doesn't even feel like it's a tri-community in our area here, as there's a lot of walls. People are not working with these people because they don't get the funding, or they don't have the funding to support these ideas. So, I mean, we had a situation where Scattered Sites was trying to relocate their homeless community just over a block, and because it's next to businesses right on the main street in town of La Ronge, that they voted against it, and now these people are left out in the cold for another year, and hopefully that there's going to be some changes happening there soon. So there's a lot of divisions in our community. So we need to start addressing those, and we need to start bringing people, sitting them down at the table and discussing concerns, ideas, suggestions across the table. So that way we can start working together in the right direction, not only for us, but for our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And so thank you guys so much for being on. That was an awesome conversation, and I love hearing everything that you guys have to say. And so just before we finish up, do each of you guys have any social medias or websites or Facebook pages that you wanted to sort of just draw attention to at the end here?
Well, Walking with Our Angels is our Facebook page that was made for the duration of the walk. And my intention was to keep it up permanently so that teachers and other people interested in this topic and this public issue could have all of the articles that we've been in for resources and all of the podcast interviews, etc., and plus pictures and posts from the duration of our walk, just as like a little historical scrapbook of what happened. So that page will remain up. There won't be any new posts made to it because the walk is now finished, and if anybody's interested in reading more about all that happened, there's everything there. There's the good articles that were helpful and supportive, and there was the what can be called the bad articles that were a little bit politically tilted, biased, and very obviously kind of a little bit trivializing. But anything that referenced us and wrote about us, I did post on the page. So that'll always be up there as a resource, because I have a lot of young Indigenous educators and friends like that teach social studies and Indigenous studies and history and what have you. And they were hoping they could use some of that for just topic discussions in the class. So that'll be up there for me. And I believe you have a Facebook page, hey Chris, and that's more active.
Yes, we have Men of the North Facebook page out there, and we post up all our meeting times, all our community-based activities, all our volunteer call-outs, anything that we have an idea. Some guys bring some ideas to the table, and we just try them and see what happens and see how far it goes. So we try to involve elders, men, women, and children in our group activities as to bring the more community based structure to our community. And as well as, if you want, we have an email. It's at westandtogether@menofthenorth.net as well. Oh, sorry. And then we are working on a website as well, but that's still in development stage.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks again for coming on, you guys. It was great to have you.
Well, thank you, Aidan. You were very patient, very kind, good questions, and I'll send you the audio.
Yes, thank you very much. It was awesome. Absolutely enjoyed my time here today. Thank you very much.
See you guys.